If you've ever looked at a recipe for risotto and thought, "Ugh, that's too much work," you're right, absolutely right. My way of making risotto is much simpler and easier, and you get pretty much the same result. Here's how I do it. I'm going to start off with an onion. I've got a half a red onion here left over from the night before. I'm just going to go ahead and use this. Obviously, any onion would be fine. My wife did comment that the risotto was pretty oniony when we ate it later, so depending on how oniony you want your risotto, you may want to go with only a quarter of an onion here. But a half an onion makes a pretty oniony flavor, which I like. Or you could just leave them out entirely if you're not an onion person. Next up is the butternut squash. These come in all different kind of shapes and sizes. This is what I would probably call a medium-sized squash. But for this recipe, I do look for a butternut squash that is in the medium to small size range. I want there to be plenty of butternut squash in this risotto, but the real star of the show is the rice, so I don't want the risotto to be taken over by the butternut squash. But like I said, I think this one's about a medium size is what I would classify it. And I'm just going to cut the ends off and then go vertically from top to bottom with my knife there and get that skin off. A vegetable peel will work for this too, but the skin is pretty thick on a butternut squash, so you'd probably have to go over it with maybe 2 passes with a vegetable peeler. Once the skin is removed, it's time to slice it in half, and we need to carve out those seeds in the middle, and a teaspoon is the perfect tool for that. I find it best to just go slow with this and take your time to get the seeds out. If you start getting in a hurry, you'll start flinging seeds everywhere and you'll just end up making a mess, so I like to take my time on this little task. And I'm going to cut up this squash into pretty small pieces. First, I'm going to cut them into kind of French fry type shapes that are probably about a 1/4 inch by a 1/4 inch. And then, of course, cut them into cubes here. So I've got about 1/4 inch cubes. I want them to be pretty small. The main reason for cutting them small is so that they'll cook in a reasonable amount of time. Great big chunks of squash will just take a long time to cook. And I want to make sure this squash is thoroughly cooked when the rice is done cooking as well. And here's the arborio rice. This is the traditional rice used to make risotto, and it's got a higher starch content than regular rice, which is why it's used mainly for this dish. But you can make risotto with regular rice too. I've done that, but this will give you a little bit better result. Since this is a 12-ounce package, I'm just going to dump out 1 cup because we don't need the full package for our dinner tonight. And since I've got 1 cup rice, I'm going to go with 2 cups water. And I'm going to add some bouillon into that water. So I've got 1 cup rice and 2 cups chicken broth. And I like this powder kind of bouillon. I'm not a fan of those pre-wrapped cubes. And that liquid stock you buy at the store just doesn't seem to have any flavor at all. So this is my preferred way to make chicken stock. So I'm going to dump those onions and squash pieces into an oiled saucepan on medium-high heat. Give those a stir just to get some of that oil mixed around on all those vegetables. And I'm going to put the lid on just to hold in the heat for the next few minutes and just kind of bring up the heat of everything and get those things going. We're not doing any browning here, just bringing all the vegetables up to temperature. So after about 5 minutes, those onions and squash have kind of come up to temperature and they're starting to cook a little bit. And I'm going to give those a stir and I'm going to add in that cup of arborio rice. I'm going to give that a mix real quick, and then I'm going to add all 2 cups of that stock that I made earlier, all at once. And I know this is not the traditional way to make risotto by adding all the liquid at once, but this is the easy part that I was talking about. And trust me, the result is going to be just as good. With traditional risotto recipes, you'll find that they say you're supposed to stand there and continually stir and continually add stock as the rice absorb it, just 1 spoonful at a time, and just continually basically babysit this for an entire 30 minutes until it's ready. And who has time for that? This method is much simpler with a very similar end result. We're only going to stir the risotto every 10 minutes or so. We're just going to leave the lid on. Once that starts bubbling, then I'm going to go ahead and give it 1 more little stir, and I'm going to turn that burner down from medium-high down to medium, so we don't want it to burn. And since I don't have to constantly babysit the risotto, I have time to do something else, like prepare some breaded chicken to have with my risotto. And here we are after 10 minutes. As you can see, a lot of the liquid has been absorbed, but it's still pretty wet. Just going to give it a little stir, lid goes back on. And while that's cooking, I'm going to grate up some Parmesan cheese. This is my preferred tool for doing this. This is a microplane, but obviously you can use a regular cheese grater as well, or a vegetable peeler works pretty good too for getting some thin slices of hard cheeses like Parmesan. But this microplane creates some really thin shavings of this hard Parmesan cheese, and it's just really airy, and it really melts great in things, and it's going to melt really great in our risotto. But like I said, shavings with a vegetable peeler will work just fine too. And I'm going to add just a little bit of water back into my measuring cup that I had my stock in, and we're going to use that at the end just to fine-tune this risotto. So here we are 20 minutes in. As you can see, it's starting to dry out a little bit. The rice has absorbed almost all the liquid, and I'm going to add some more liquid now. All in all, I probably added back another about half a cup here, and the lid goes back on. And while that's happening, I'm going to throw some green beans in some boiling water. Those take about 10 minutes to boil. And 10 more minutes later here, we're at 30 minutes total time, and as you can see, almost all the liquid is absorbed again. And I know what you're thinking, that doesn't look like risotto, and you're right, but it will in a second. I'm going to add that grated Parmesan cheese and about another half cup of the broth liquid. I'm going to give that a good mix up, add a little bit of pepper. I'm not going to add any salt because that cheese is really salty. And I'm just going to keep on stirring while that rice absorbs that extra half cup of liquid that I just poured in. And as I'm stirring, I'm just going to be observing the consistency and seeing if it's looking creamy enough or too dry or too wet. And this is the part where you just add a little bit of liquid at a time over the course of the next, 3-4 minutes or so until you get that consistency fine-tuned to exactly the way you want it. So instead of spending an entire 30 minutes standing there adding liquid a little bit at a time, just do it for the last 3 or 4 minutes at the end, and you really just get an excellent result. Tonight we're serving this risotto alongside some crispy baked chicken and some green beans. This is a great combination. Check the description for a link on how to make that crispy chicken. But that's my recipe for easy butternut squash risotto. Hope you found that useful. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. See you on the next one.